Hi Neurospices, welcome back to Late Diagnosed. For those of you who are new, my name is Michelle and I was diagnosed in late 2023 with ADHD and autism, otherwise known as AUDHD. My life has been a long journey of burnouts, of misdiagnoses and health challenges. Today I want to share more of my story by answering some thoughtful questions about my childhood, my struggles, my unmasking journey and my hopes for the future. If you've ever felt like your life didn't make any sense until much later on, you might find a little bit of your own story here too. Let's dive in. Looking back at your childhood, what are some early signs of autism or ADHD that were missed? Were you just a quirky kid, or were there clues hiding in plain sight? That's a really hard question for me. I've been looking back on my life and what I know now, and what the medical profession know now is like night and day compared to what was known when I was a kid. The stomach issues I had back then tell me that my nervous system was dysregulated. Add to that, I was always creative, and something I found out recently, my memory was an indicator of autism. My first memory was from when I was just 18 months old, and I have many more memories from my childhood in Papua New Guinea in comparison to my other siblings. What did masking look like for you as a child, especially in school or social settings? How did you learn to hide your differences, and at what cost? I've heard people talk about how ADHD or autism or just ADHD is a trendy diagnosis and more people are being diagnosed now. Well, as someone who is also left-handed, the rise of left-handedness increased dramatically when it was no longer frowned upon to be left-handed. So the prevalence of later ADHD or autistic diagnoses tell me that the understanding for neurodivergence is growing and expanding. For me, masking as a child was learning how to mimic others, observing how they did things and copying that in order to fit in. I always felt like a square peg in a round hole. I've spoken about that before. And it cost me my mental health. I wasn't coping, but I masked that too and made out that everything was fine, even though I was barely coping behind the scenes a lot of the time. How has masking and living undiagnosed affected your physical health over the years? Let's talk about the connection between neurodivergence, nervous system dysregulation, and chronic exhaustion. Looking back, I've realised that a lot of my health issues are actually basically because my nervous system has been dysregulated. The prevalence of stomach issues is higher for those of us who are neurodivergent, and I can't go past that stat when I understand how much we have to mask and therefore burn ourselves out in order to fit into a world that's only made for neurotypicals and is completely biased against anyone who doesn't fit that expectation. What did your cycle of burnouts look like over the decades, and how did you mistake them for depression and anxiety? My first instance of depression and anxiety as a diagnosis was postnatal depression after my second son was born. I put it down to several factors that had happened during my pregnancy that caused emotional turmoil for me. But in hindsight, it was also probably a build-up of my own high expectations for perfection that I wasn't able to meet when measuring myself against the neurotypical standard. Finding out that I was ADHD helped me to be so much less critical of myself. And it stopped me from basing my judgment of myself to a neurotypical way of doing things, and helped to remind me that the way I think is different and not wrong. What has unmasking been like for you? What's the hardest part of letting go of a mask you wore for decades? And what's been the most freeing part? Unmasking has been a journey for sure. Probably the hardest part for me has been learning what masking actually is. And then the next hardest part has been to advocate for myself. For example, people, work colleagues, friends, etc., have been used to the way that I've always been. So when they're told of my diagnosis, the first thoughts or comments have been things like, well, you don't seem autistic, or you don't look like you have ADHD. And I've learned that's because I've been very good at masking. But that means there's been a huge cost to me personally for that. And it's been the main reason for my exhaustion and burnouts over the years. I'm still working out how to unmask, and that's an ongoing journey. The most freeing part about that has been that I've learned to be kinder to myself now that I understand why I am the way that I am. How are you learning to live life on the spectrum now? From honouring your sensory needs to pacing yourself, what does daily life look like for you as you unmask? I've been learning how to listen to my body's cues. For example, when I'm suddenly feeling anxious, I ask myself what's causing the anxiety. Sometimes I'll take a rescue remedy lozenge if it's something I can't walk away from, like at work, for example. But if it's something I can step away from, I do that. I take a break and do something to help regulate myself. I'm finding in burnout that's a lot harder to do. And actually last week, when I was getting last week's video ready, I was very close to a meltdown in just trying to get it finished. It was on my mind along with a long list of other things. And throughout the day, I was having heart palpitations, which I know now is my body telling me that I'm dysregulated and I need to step back or listen better to my body. I had contemplated recording a quick video that wouldn't require editing, which takes a lot of time to do, and sharing that I was having a really hard time and just uploading that video. But instead, I decided to go to bed, try and get a good night's sleep, and instead of having a video set ready to release at 7 a.m. on Saturday like I normally do, I would get up, have a slow morning and edit my video, then release it once it was ready, and not hold myself to the 7 a.m. release time. I've learned to be flexible with myself. Not ideal for my channel, but better for my own mental health. And I know my subscribers who are also neurospicy will understand that. What emotions did you go through when you received your autism and ADHD diagnosis at age 54? Was it a relief, a shock, a bit of both? Firstly, as I've shared in a previous video, link below, when I was first diagnosed, I misread the report and thought I'd been diagnosed only with ADHD. When I went back and read the report thoroughly, that's when I found out I also had autism and was showing high masking. So the response was a mixture of grief and relief. In hindsight, probably more grief, if I'm truly honest. I'm aware of the discrimination for people with autism, and I didn't want to be in that basket. No one would willingly put themselves into a situation where people will look down on them, prejudge them and discriminate against them. I still face those issues, and being misunderstood is like my kryptonite. I find it really hard to deal with that. How did years of misdiagnoses like depression and anxiety impact your understanding of yourself? And how do you feel now, knowing the real reason behind those symptoms? A little bit of the backstory. I've been married twice. My second marriage, unfortunately, was an abusive one, and my mental health absolutely crashed during that period, something that's expected when you're being psychologically abused. But when you're also undiagnosed and already super critical of yourself, any criticism from the person in your life who's supposed to love and support you the most just hits harder. Episodes of depression, or as I've come to understand, my natural reaction to being abused, were used against me in that marriage, and I was made to feel like there was something inherently wrong with me by my ex-husband. Not only was he gaslighting me, undermining me, and making me feel like a massive failure, he targeted the things that I wasn't good at, whilst simultaneously using me for all the things I was very good at. A lot of therapy later, recovering from that abuse, having a diagnosis of complex PTSD, along with my diagnosis of autism and ADHD, I'm working out what is accountable to what. And I'm learning what works best for me. It's an ongoing thing. Burnout is affecting me deeply, so I'm still navigating that. I'm a work in progress. I expect I'll still be learning 10 years from now, but hopefully I'll have a good handle on my own needs by then. What's the biggest lesson you've learned about yourself since being diagnosed? And how has that changed the way you see your past and your future? This is a really good question, but also a really hard one. I guess the biggest lesson I've learned is that I've always been enough. So many years feeling like a complete failure has drained me of energy, self-esteem, and caused just so much heartache for me. I now see myself as someone who's extremely talented, amazingly empathetic and insightful. I am great at a lot of things, and I'm learning that just because I find some things really difficult doesn't make me a failure. It's been a bit of a journey to look back on my life and reflect on all the things I've achieved and compare those to the things that I've perceived as failures. I've succeeded at so many more things than I've failed at. It's also interesting to me that my failures have been in many things where I've been measuring myself against the neurotypical standard. I've said before that expecting myself to be able to climb a tree when I'm a fish is actually ridiculous. So understanding that what I'm great at is within my own environment of the ocean and not high up in the trees where I don't thrive or survive. Understanding that has been a game changer for me. Now that you're embracing life as an autistic and ADHD woman, what are your hopes for the future? And how do you want to use what you've learned to inspire or help others? My hopes for the future. Just that thought actually makes me smile. Understanding myself has been and continues to be absolutely massive. It's opened new doors for me. 5 years ago, I was in a completely different place. I was off work dealing with the fallout of the abuse, getting treatment for complex PTSD and depression. I was barely able to cope day to day, and I had no ability to do basic things besides cooking, showering, taking care of my cats. It was a very hard time, and I'm thankful that my son had moved in with me when he lost his job over COVID and was able to support me. Having him in my home gave me a purpose to get up and function. When he moved out and I went back to work, working was my primary focus, and I put my struggles down to still recovering. And at the time, I didn't understand that removing the layers of abuse had uncovered the basic problems that I'd been having my whole life, and eventually helped me to see that the underlying issues that I'd been dealing with were actually my neurodivergence. Now that I'm able to understand myself better, I've been able to work with my own unique skills, abilities, and also understand my needs. My future looks positive. I know what my brain needs to be productive. I know what it needs to stay regulated. And I know how to better allow for that so that my future involves so much more than what I thought was previously possible. It looks like increasing my YouTube channel's reach. It looks like hopefully creating an investment portfolio to the degree where I'll be able to cut down on the hours I'm working in my day job and therefore remove some of my main stresses. And it also looks like traveling more, creating more time to do the things that light me up from the inside. It looks like watching my grandson grow and learn and spending more time with my family and close friends. Life looks good, and I'm looking forward to the coming months and years, knowing that understanding my own unique needs more means that life will be more authentic, and hopefully, by sharing all that with you, will help you to achieve your own goals too. Understanding yourself is key to living a fulfilling life. Learning how to live life on the spectrum is a journey, and I'm still only in the very early days of it. And I hope that by sharing this with you, you'll also begin to understand yourself and realise that a late diagnosis is not a death sentence or something to be feared. It has its challenges for sure, but being able to understand yourself and your unique brain is most definitely very freeing. Learning how to let go of your own perfectionism and expectations to meet neurotypical standards is so freeing. It's definitely not easy, but it is worth living life more authentically. That's a glimpse into my journey. If you can relate to any part of my story or have your own experiences to share, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Remember, it's never too late to start understanding yourself and living more authentically. Thanks for being here. If you've stayed here this long, please hit the like button. And if you're not already subscribed, please hit subscribe. And click on the bell so that you get notified every time I release a new video. Thanks for being here as always. Catch you in the next one.